I can't watch my childhood TV shows anymore because I can't unsee what I know now. And the weird thing is, I didn't realize it right away. See, recently I made a video about Amanda Bynes, and while I was researching her story, it started making me nostalgic for that entire era of Nickelodeon. So after I finished the video, I decided to go back and watch some of the old shows I grew up on, like The Amanda Show and all that. And I wasn't looking for anything specific, or was I trying to analyze anything. I honestly was just looking for that feeling again. You know that feeling I'm talking about. That feeling of being a kid and turning on a show without thinking twice about it. So that's what I did, and I hit play. And for the first few minutes, it worked. The jokes were landing. I started remembering scenes before they even happened. It felt like running into an old friend. Then the theme song for The Amanda Show came on, and something happened to me in my head. At one point during the theme song, Amanda said, "I love you, Dan."
Love you, Dan.
And the second I heard it, I knew exactly who she was talking about. And usually that line would have gone completely over my head, but this time it didn't. Because instead of hearing a joke in an old Nickelodeon intro, my brain immediately jumped to Dan Schneider and the Quiet on the Set documentary. And once that thought showed up in my head, it didn't really leave. But I kept watching anyway. And every once in a while, something would happen that pulled me right out of the nostalgia. And before long, I realized I wasn't watching these shows the same way anymore. Let's talk about it. So one thing I should probably mention before I go further is that I just recently watched the Quiet on the Set documentary. And before watching that documentary, most of these scenes never stood out to me. Most of these sketches never really stood out to me. I'm just a guy watching a show. I watched these shows the same way everybody else did. I laughed at the jokes, I enjoyed the characters, but when I watched the documentary, I learned things I didn't know before. I heard people point out things that used to completely go over my head. So when I went back and started rewatching these shows, I wasn't watching them with the same perspective anymore. And that's where all these observations started coming from. The Amanda Show was the first thing that really threw me off. It started with that one line, "I love you, Dan." Then I immediately started noticing something else. It wasn't one scene, it wasn't one episode, it wasn't even just one show. It was a pattern. And the more I watched, the more moments I recognized from the documentary started showing up. Scenes I had seen discussed in the documentary. Scenes that now came with context. And once that context was in my head, it was hard not to think about it. And the more I watched was the more I found myself getting pulled out of the show and into my own thoughts. And that's where things started to get uncomfortable. So after the "I love you, Dan" moment, I tried to move past it. I figured maybe it was just one weird moment, so I kept watching. Then I started jumping around different episodes of The Amanda Show, just watching random clips and random sketches, trying to find that same feeling I remembered as a kid. And then I landed on the hot tub scene. You know what I'm talking about, the one with Amanda and Dan Schneider sitting in a hot tub together. The second I saw it, my mind immediately went back to that documentary. I remembered them talking about that exact scene. I remembered people explaining why they thought it was inappropriate. And suddenly, that was all I could think about. And the longer I sat there watching it, the harder it became to ignore how weird it felt. So I clicked away and watched another episode. At that point, I was still trying to enjoy the show. I was still trying to find something that felt the way it used to. Then I saw Drake from Drake and Josh popped up on the screen again in one of the sketches. And that's when it hit me. I started thinking about what happened to him. I started thinking about what Drake revealed years later. How Brian Peck, a dialogue coach who worked on Nickelodeon Productions, essayed him. And it just made me sad. Because when I look at Drake now, I don't just see the kid from The Amanda Show anymore. I see somebody who went through something horrible.
In hindsight, I should have been able to see, but as a kid, you have no clue. But my dad saw it a mile away.
Young actor.
You know, anytime I would have an audition or anytime I needed to work on dialogue or anything, I somehow ended up back at Brian's house, and it just got worse and worse and worse.
And once that thought shows up, it's hard to stay in the moment. Part of me is still watching the sketch, but another part of me is thinking about everything that happened behind the scenes. And that's when I realized something. I wasn't really enjoying the show anymore. Every episode felt like it came with baggage. Every scene felt like it came with a darker story behind it, and that completely changed the experience. So at that point, I figured maybe I was just overthinking it. Maybe the Quiet on the Set documentary was still fresh in my head, and maybe that was the real reason I couldn't stop thinking about all this stuff. So I decided to watch all that. And I know you're thinking, why would you watch another Dan Schneider show if it's already making you feel uncomfortable? Well, I'll tell you why. I started to wonder something. I started wondering, was I ever going to be able to watch a Dan Schneider show again without immediately thinking about everything I learned from Quiet on the Set? Or was every show from that era going to feel different now? And if I'm being perfectly honest, there was another reason too. Part of me wanted to see those scenes for myself, the scenes people kept bringing up in the documentary, because it's one thing to watch a documentary, it's another thing to watch the actual episode. You know, sometimes documentaries can frame things a certain way, they can add dramatic music, they can zoom in on something, they can isolate a moment or a scene from the rest of the episode. So I wanted to see it in context, and I wanted to know if these scenes really felt as weird as people were saying they did. And the more I watched, the more I realized, yeah, they did. They were really freaking weird. One of the first examples was Noseman. There's a scene where this kid, he plays this superhero called Noseman, and he sneezes on a girl. And before the documentary, this would have been just another dumb sketch. But now I couldn't stop seeing what they were talking about. The sexual innuendo. The visual immediately reminded me of the way the documentary framed it.
The joke in that sketch is effectively a shot joke. It's a shot joke for children.
I'm just looking back at it, it's just very strange. Frankly, it was just uncomfortable.
And instead of laughing at the joke, I found myself sitting there wondering, why would somebody think that belonged in a kid's show? Then there was another sketch with a kid covered in peanut butter while a dog was licking the peanut butter off of him. And that one was even harder for me to watch, because even watching it in full context of the episode, it still felt weird. It still felt out of place. It still made me stop and think, why was this on a show made for kids? And that was the moment where I made up my mind. Because when I first started watching, I thought maybe the documentary had influenced me. Maybe I was seeing things that weren't really there. But after watching these episodes for myself, I realized the documentary wasn't creating the discomfort. It was just pointing out things that were already there. And once I accepted that, something else started bothering me. I wasn't just thinking about the scenes anymore. I started thinking about the people making them. I started thinking about Dan Schneider. I started thinking about the stories former cast members had told, the stories about him yelling at people, the stories about how uncomfortable the environment was, the stories that made Quiet on the Set exist in the first place. And suddenly, I realized I wasn't watching the show anymore. I was thinking about everything that happened around it. And by that point, the nostalgia was pretty much gone. I was done. I was like, fuck it, I'm done with Nickelodeon. So I decided to switch gears. Now, I still wanted that feeling of nostalgia, but I decided to get it from somewhere else. So I put on that 70s show. And at first, it worked. The theme song came on, the basement scenes were still funny as hell, Kelso was still Kelso, Red was still Red, but every time Hyde showed up on the screen, I felt that same feeling creeping back in. I couldn't stop thinking about Danny Masterson. I couldn't stop thinking about the fact that he was convicted of essaying 2 women and sentenced to 30 years to life in prison. And once that thought got into my head, it changed the way I looked at Hyde. Because Hyde used to be one of my favorite characters. He was sarcastic, he was funny, he was the guy who always seemed cooler than everybody else. But now every scene he's in feels different. And the weird thing is, the train of thought didn't stop with that 70s show. Because while I was sitting there watching it, I suddenly started thinking about the Netflix show The Ranch. And then it hit me. When I was watching The Ranch, those crimes had already happened. All those scenes, all those episodes, the entire time I was watching that show, I was watching somebody who had already done some horrific things. And that realization made me feel weird all over again. Then I started thinking about Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis, and the fact that they wrote letters supporting Danny Masterson before his sentencing. And that changed the way I looked at them too. Now I'm sitting there watching Kelso, Jackie, and Hyde, these characters I grew up with, and all this other stuff is running through my head at the same time. It was the exact same feeling I had with Nickelodeon, just for a completely different reason. And that's when something finally clicked for me. This wasn't really about Nickelodeon. It wasn't really about the Quiet on the Set documentary. It was about what happens when you learn something that permanently changes the way you see somebody. Because once that happens, sometimes you can't go back, no matter how badly you want the nostalgia. It's strange because I know these shows didn't actually change. They're exactly the way they've always been. But what's different is what I know now. Every time I saw Amanda, I thought about what was happening behind the scenes. Every time I saw Drake, I thought about what happened to him. Every time I saw one of those old sketches, I found myself thinking about the man who created them. And then when I switched over to that 70s show, the exact same thing happened all over again. And I think that's what I've been trying to figure out this entire video. How much of what we love is actually the thing itself? Because the truth is, most of the time we have no idea what was happening behind the scenes while these shows were being made. We don't know what these actors were going through. We don't know what the people making these shows were doing. We don't know what stories are waiting to come out years later. And yet somehow, the moment we learn those things, it completely changes the way we see the characters, the shows, and the memories attached to them. Now, if you guys stay till the end, I really do appreciate it. Let me know what you think in the comments. Did these shows change for you too, or am I tripping? And what other controversy or situations completely change how you see a show or actor? And if you want to support the channel, you already know what to do. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.